Didactic Unit 4, the Sedimentary Basin. Due to the largeness of the sedimentary basin of Zamora, situated in the provincial east, and the differences that exist, especially originated by the hydrographical main, we share this unit in two parts. On the one hand, Benavente and Los Valles, and on the other hand, Tierra de Campos, Tierra del Pan, and Alfoz de Toro. Benavente and Los Valles, the murmur of the water. Water, Isla, Órbigo, Terra, Thea, Area, Almuzera, Castron, irrigation channels, veins that nourish with fertility this region, made by slime, clay and sand, and men made the rest and converted it into a garden. It is the Mesopotamia of Zamora that attracted settlers from the prehistory and gave the denomination of origin to every valley that integrates it. Valle de Vidriales, generated by the stream Almuzera. Valle del Regato, Valle del Valverde, originated by the stream Castron, and the valleys of the rivers Area, Órbigo and Terra, as well as the fertile lands of the Isla and Thea that shares with Tierra de Campos. The territory was formed during the Tertiary and Quaternary ages, when the alpine folds fractured and buried the Paleozoic foundations, originating a depression that was filled by lime, sand, slime and conglomerate, swept by the erosion of the rivers, generating a plain of inundation. Only the Paleozoic massif of Sierra de Carpurias, formed by slate and quartzite and penetrating from Leon province, interrupts the geological and landscape uniformity of the region. Thus the rivers have become the axes that give structure to the territory across the valleys that they have generated. They are wide and sometimes flooded valleys, and due to the gentle slope of the rivers, their course is sinuous, with a lot of islands, meanders and branches. They have a rainfall and snow pattern, having their biggest course in the winter, with hard dryness and some specific risings. This is the reason why a lot of populations have been settled in alluvial terraces, frightening of the cyclic devastating power of the floods. However, there are some others that continue fastened on the riversides, as most of them is situated in the middle of the valleys to exploit their numerous resources. As capital of the region, Benavente, that is a town situated on a promontory called Mota, with modern buildings and urban drawing, but without losing the architectonic elements of its large history. All the localities have a concentrated population, with terraced houses forming blocks, flat and sinuous streets, or in a gentle slope. Some of those streets show houses with shields that remember the ancient noble power. Symbol of that power, or the royal one, is the roll kept in Matilla de Arzón, the only one in the region. There is still a community fountain in all of them, some from ancient root, some others from popular nature. In their proximities, there are a lot of familiar vegetable gardens, and to look after them and to keep the farm implements, some guard shacks were built, made in block and the skirting board with pebbles and quartzite, or in masonry without any mortar. Thus, due to this real main of fluvial courses and the lime and clay of the terrain, the agricultural vocation is given by the nature. Besides, a real main of irrigation channels is created and cuts through most of the region, giving as a result a rich irrigated agriculture based on pastures and crops of maize, beetroot, alfalfa and peppers. Next to it, and as a defining element of the landscape, the plantations of black poplars are, in general, Canadian black poplar, to exploit the wood. Opposite it, in the places far from the rivers and channels, the unirrigated lands prosper, dedicated to the cereal crop and, in a lesser extent, to vineyards. However, the extension of the vineyards was much larger than nowadays. A proof of it is the shape in a dome form of the warehouses around all the villages. Taking advantage of the small clay promontories, some warehouses were excavated with a pick, generally with a vault in a Gothic form, without reinforcements and with a little depth. The growing lands decrease from east to west, being replaced by pastures, scrubland and wooded. It is the ambit with the stubbles that the sheep profit to graze. This extensive profit of the terrain has not achieved the extinction of the original vegetation of the zone. This one varies depending on the environment where it is placed. So, the fluvial courses are rich in their pools of wild gooseberries and buttercups, as a white carpet during the spring, while on their riversides, rushes, bulrushes and reeds are growing. The humidity feeds rich groves by a river that become gallery forest and have as the most outstanding characteristic its establishment in parallel strips to the river, depending on the biggest or smallest need of water of the plants and on the biggest or smallest endurance to the stroke of the current. So, on the banks themselves, different types of willows grow. A second strip is constituted by alders. Something more separated, black poplars, poplars and ash trees grow in more or less compact formations. Finally, on the edges of the alluvial terraces, in a steeper slope and poorer grounds, ilex woods in combination with undergrowth of rock roses and thymes appear. Due to the new plantations, the surface dedicated to pine woods is increasing. And where the conjunct of rock comes to the surface with more strength, the heathers grow, and in spring dye violet the southern hills of the Sierra de Carpurias. And in a total accommodation to the environment, to exploit and profit it, men use water, mud, stone and wood. The water, mainly used for the irrigation, also serves to make the mills move. Their construction started branching off a channel from the river to the mill, where there is a widening or a pool to control the water by means of sluice gates and to direct it to the water wheels. The water flows into the buckets or spades of the water wheel, that, by means of an axe, makes turn the crushing stones on the millstone. At the same time, the grain, introduced in the hopper, falls with rhythm and goes down to the grindstones or millstones, becoming flour by crushing, and by means of an elevator it goes up to the bag. And due to the continental climate of the zone, with long and cold winters and short and hot summers and a little rainfall, the villager used the mud as constructive material, thermal and mouldable insulation, more in a block form than in adobe, complemented in the skirting board with pebbles or quartzite. And to protect the mud from the inclemency of the weather, it was plastered and whitewashed, so it improved its endurance and brightness. Thus the houses rise up, generally with 1 or 2 floors. Houses open to the streets through the windows, viewpoint or balconies, a lot of them with archways. Besides, they have got some attached big doors called carreteras, and frequently some sheds, where the pruning of ilexes and heathers is dried to be burnt in the hard winters and in the ovens of bread. Also in mud, that bends some facades out. And their beautiful chimneys in mud, really rude, are unmistakable. Conic with perforated finishing or trunk, pyramidal with eaves. During the 19th century, and mainly during the first half of the 20th century, the solid brick is introduced as constructive material for the richest peoples, designing different decorative motifs of a big visual impact on the facades. And the doorways are framed in wood. Wood that the carpenters of the zone convert into large doors called carreteras. And on the houses' doors, where they carve geometric, floral or Eucharistic motifs. And to stand them out, they are painted in bright colours. They also make some locks in wood for guard shacks. On the other hand, the iron men of the zone finish enhancing the doors with well-worked locks, whose shields are full of geometric motifs. Daisies, bells, birds, dogs, and the names initials of the house owners. Also in mud and in wood, the dovecots rise up. The zone has many examples of different types and factory, but it is especially in the wind cutters where laces of a great plasticity are drawn in mud. Mud. Water. Water that becomes light. Mud that becomes gold because of the sun at the sunset. It is the garden of this Mesopotamia of Zamora. Tierra de Campos, Tierra del Pan, and Alfoz Norte de Toro. About cereal and mud. It is a large plain of changing colours. Green swell of cereal in a sea of clay. Smooth hills. White hills of flat summits. Dismal solitude. Villagers looking each other from the high towers of their churches. Dovecots and houses rising up from the mud and dying by the mud, without distorting the environment, and the stork looking everything over. These features define 3 traditional regions from Zamora. And thus, this large region that forms part of the Castilian Meseta is the result of the depot of sediments of marls, clay and slime, which during the Tertiary and Quaternary ages left the rivers in this basin generated by the Hercynian and Alpine folds. Its uniform landscape with flat or smoothly undulated forms is only interrupted inside by some calcareous hills, like the Teso de la Mora. It is on their western and southern edges where geological and relief changes are produced, especially in the proximities of the river Esla from Fontanillos de Castro and of the Duero from Almaraz. Here, schist, granite, quartzite and slate appear again, giving as result spectacular rocks, squeezed landscapes and deep gorges. They are the Arribes del Duero and the Arribanzos del Esla, which have been profited for the construction of dams of hydroelectrical production and spectacular works of engineering. Though on the edges there are rivers with a great volume of water, in the interior of the region there is a hydrographical main not too much dense, with a little volume of water due to the permeability of the terrain and to the weather with little rainfall and high evaporation. The river Balderaduey runs through the region from north to south, and coming from the mountains of León, goes to flow into the Duero near Villagodio. It accumulates a big quantity of detritus sediments,